Dobrý večer, milé divačky a milí diváci. Jmenuji se Ivana Formanová a jsem vedoucí Industry for Science na festivalu AFO. Za malou chvíli uvidíte rozhovor o filmu Hádanky z kostí, Genderová revoluce, který v rámci mezinárodní soutěže AFO 56 můžete zhlédnout na naší platformě watchandknow.cz. Nezapomeňte, že pro film můžete hlasovat do divácké soutěže na našem webu afo.cz. Následující rozhovor proběhne v anglickém jazyce s českými titulky. A nyní je mi ctí zde přivítat režisérku filmu Birgit Tanner a antropoložku a archeoložku Kate Pechenkina. Ladies, welcome and thank you for being here. Thank you also for the research and for the wonderful film. I'm a big fan of it. So my first question actually goes to both of you. In 2019, AFO, part of the AFO Film Festival was dedicated to reinterpretation of women in history, especially their role as women warriors. It seems to be quite a popular topic in the scientific research as well as in filmmaking. Do you agree, Birgit?
Yes, I think so, because we see in many countries around the world that women demanding all over the world their rights. Yeah, they are loud and they are proud, and from my perspective of view, as they are right. Yeah, they stimulate the social debate about equality, and it is in full swing in many parts of the world, and therefore it's only logical for us filmmakers to take up this topic, of course. And I think it's very important. And I think this includes not only to tell or to cover the current debate. We have to look also in the past, in the history of humanity. And what we see is that in recent years, it has become quite clear that the traditional roles of men and women we learned at school, for example, are simply wrong. And I think it's our job, in collaboration with scientists like Kate, to tell a broad public that many aspects of our known history needs rewriting. And I think, yes, it's more and more in focus of the people that there is something else we have to know.
Well, if I may jump in, I see this topic actually as quite controversial, and I'll give you maybe an alternative perspective of how we can think about it. First of all, in my mind, the idea of glamorizing warriors, of course it's empowering for women, but glamorizing warriors who, if we are honest with ourselves, it's just being good at killing people. This is something that stems from the patriarchal, I have police in the background, from the patriarchal society and from patriarchal thinking. Warriors are glamorized in history written by males. So do we want to say that through the past women were just as good in killing people as men? I'm not sure that that's necessarily the feminist thinking. Men and women are different in many respects, and the role of you can try to portray warriors as protectors, but there is no warrior who didn't kill people. Can a woman be a warrior? Absolutely. We have women snipers, we have women in military, they can be successful. Is it a common place for women in the past? Does it empower us in the modern society thinking of ourselves as successful killers of the past? I'm not so sure. I'll leave you with that to think about it.
So how successful are science communicators in sharing this newly acquired knowledge with the public?
Bridget, what do you think?
I can already tell you from the reactions from the films I made. So I see that a broad part of the society is dealing with this issue quite differently than in the past. So the feedback to the film riddle of the bone is in Germany largely positive. So there are only a few negative voices, and you have always a few negative voices. But most of the audience or the viewers tell us or write to me, please tell me more about gender archaeology. And they ask me for books, males and females, yeah? And they want to know more of these scientific details. And and I think it's now more welcome than in the past that we choose a new narrative and it's accepted, or more and more on the way to be accepted.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there was maybe a lag before media caught on to this topic, but through starting from 1990, there is a clear shift in archaeology towards more and more female archaeologists and females dominating the profession. We used to make experiment with the students in, say, 2003, 2004. We would say, in the first archaeology class, sketch an archaeologist. And they would always sketch a guy with a shawl or a trowel, the kind of Indiana Jones hat. And that has started to change because obviously archaeology professors became at least 50-50 females. So through now, what is it, 2020, the profession is clearly revised the role of females in profession and role of females in the past.
So do you believe it is important to emphasize these new discoveries about women regarding feminism and women in a socio-political context? Birgit?
Yeah, what we can do with this facts for feminism. I mean, we talked about the warrior thing. I had another perspective. It was for me only an example. So I think it is very important to bring these historical facts, what we have done with the film, to the world, to get over of this old-fashioned traditional role model. And I think we should, or it's good to bring more and more the facts that women have contributed to the development of humanity, much more as the given credit for it. So and we should take the chance to say that very, very clear, hey, there is more. Because 50% of the world belongs to humans, so it must be more, as we actually know. And I think it will help for a better understanding.
History is often recruited by politicians and by people in power to tell public, you see, this is the things are. That's how they have always been. This is the natural order of the world. And in this respect, it's important to show that the natural order of the world is not what we stereotypically think based on, say, fairly recent European written histories. The stereotypes that were developed by late patriarchal societies of 19th century, early 20th century, looking in the past and showing that there were many different ways for many different communities, and there is really no default for a female role in the past, or is there, but it's not what we think is important.
I would like to ask you, Kate, now, is it a totally new research topic? Have we just recently discovered what a big role women played in history?
Well, what's totally new? I think now that I'm almost 50, I perceive what's new quite differently, what was new for me 20 years ago. Through 1980s, through 1980s, there was a clear shift in archaeology towards realizing that we used to approach past societies from our cultural perspective. So when we consider past societies, we tend to reproduce our own culture and our own stereotypes and take certain things for granted. Right? If you think that females have certain gender role for whatever reason, for whatever historic context, we will tend to see that role in the past. And through 20th century, that's what archaeology is. Archaeology also used to be focused more on large-scale events and large-scale shifts, and had fairly little interest in mundane. My own field, bioarchaeology, arose from the interest into putting common people, just regular people, into archaeological record. How do humans interact with tools? How do they go through their life? Just regular people, they're born, what their childhood is like, how parents interact with their children. What do females do when they're 20, when they're 30, how people age, how long they live, until we started to look at the human skeleton as a record of life. We had to operate under preconceptions and stereotypes. I still regularly hear people saying, like, one of my pet peeves, people didn't used to live long in the past. That's very commonly blurted out stereotype. Why do you think that? How would you know that? Well, things should be improving. So also view of prehistory as history as a steady progress. That's 20th century archaeology. And then 1980s, 1990s, things start shifting. We look at gender roles, and gender roles in elite and in commoners, really attention not just in major figures and major players, but people who, small villages start being excavated. How children live, and not just gender roles, role of children, role of adolescents, when people become adults, when people become old, role of elderly people in early society. All these developments really take on through the last 20 years, trying to understand regular human life day to day.
I want to go back to the film now. Birgit, can you tell us who came up with the idea for this project? Is it a scientist that pitches their research to you as a filmmaker, or was it your own personal interest?
Where I find my topics or my film ideas, the ways are different. So usually it's a news report or a podcast or a little aspect of another film I'm interested in, or current affairs. Yeah, and I want to or some events that make me want to know more about it. And usually I asking me, since when did this happen? And is there anything before this event? Is there something in history? And how did this happen? So every now and then, however, some scientists sometimes send me with, from films from the past. I collaborated with them. Sometimes they send me an email and say, hey, look at that. That's something new. Maybe it's interesting for you. So there are many different ways. In this case, Riddle of the Bones, actually, it was not my idea. It was the idea of two authors from Germany who had the idea, let's do something about gender. And they had a few other topics also. And then they have an idea, they write down a paper, and they met Christian Beetz, the producer, Beats Brothers in Berlin, and he was quite enthusiastic about that topic and told us, this would be very interesting. And then he was at the right time, at the right place, and the second ZDF, the second German broadcaster channel, was in, as they heard, as the commissioning editors heard, hey, there is a historical topic, something new, it's science, and it has to do with us today. So this was the way, and I got in a very, very early stage of the process, and also my co-director and the creative producer and so on, and then we have developed what we can tell from history, and what can be reinterpreted and so on. So and we were searching for a lot of stories, and yeah, that's the normal, the usual process you're doing for a film like that.
Would it be helpful if I jump in a little bit with more ancient history of this movie, which actually started when, or at least in my mind, it started when Professor Dong Yu from Shandong University and I published a paper on diet. And that's when we got approached by the initial producers about the idea of this movie. And then, of course, project took life on its own. But the study came as a puzzle because initially Dong Yu and I were just interested in the role of agriculture in a society. What do people eat? And we got very interesting results, unexpected results, that males ate one thing and females ate another thing. And our interest in gender differences and gender roles stemmed from that phenomenon that at first it was just puzzling. Why in one community you would have men and women with different diets? You go to early farming communities, everyone eats the same thing. And here there was such an amazing separation. First, they thought we just have a mistake, we needed to resample it. And then we started to make sense of it. So that was the initial study and for the project, at least in my mind, where it began.
Kate, it is mentioned in the film that the sudden change towards the position of women happened quite suddenly in the Bronze Age. And Thomas David Barrett sees climate change behind it, the sudden steadiness of weather conditions and the focus on agriculture. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Well, climate is usually brought in environmental changes with regard to adoption of agriculture, transition to agriculture. However, I also don't think it's that unequivocal in terms of agriculture, because in different parts of the world, yeah, there is a trend to global warming at the time, and in some places it's more stable. But when we looked at paleoclimatic record in China specifically, in different places, it's not uniform. So having climate change as a magic bullet explaining this doesn't really work for me. There are many other things that are happening. With regard to the role of the woman and the position of the woman, I'm a biologist by training, so I think about biological causes. If we think about human reproduction and females, it all starts with human females giving birth to uniquely vulnerable children. We have altricial infants whose brain needs to grow during the first year of life. Making this baby, have you seen human infant, newborn? I was afraid to touch my children until they were 6 months. Like, they're best left in a crib and I can feed them, but I don't want to bathe them because it feels like their head is going to fall off. That's human children. And that's actually unique to humans. And chimp, newborn baby can grab onto mother, and mother and an infant can forage. What happens with farming? With farming, we get cereals that we can start giving babies at 3 months age, at 6 months age, so we can supplement nursing. And as a consequence, we can have babies much, much more frequently. We can give birth every 12 months easily. In a foraging community without that agricultural food, mother nurses for 3 years. There is postpartum and fecundability. The birth span is farther apart. There is alloparenting. So one thing that happened is with that weaning food, females constantly get pregnant. They're pregnant. It's energy demanding. You're vulnerable. Then you're nursing. You tie to this screaming baby that is absolutely helpless. You need help. And that limits what you can do. Simply reducing their birth intervals was a substantial thing. Another thing is really that you start having specialization in the society, right? It's not just specialization between males and females. It's specialization for different age groups, and some individuals become wealthy, and some become poor, and some make pots. And I think females very often specialize in making pots. That's a separate interesting topic. So with specialization, there is also male-female specialization. So there are 3 different explanations for you.
Birgit, was there anything that surprised you while you were filming, or were you previously familiar with the topic?
There were many surprising facts. So the most surprising for me was actually the development of modern sciences in the 19th century, and how they developed within this framework in that time. Some scientists told me and explained to me, and this framework included also the Christian religion, and this Christian religion itself was not questioned. So to understand why we have these role models today, so it was created more and more by these so-called scientists, in the 19th century, and that was very, 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 very surprising for me. And additionally, the fact that they wanted to show that the natural role of women is at home and at the hearth, and they did it. They did it maybe only for the reason not to endanger their own maybe social position, and that was surprising for me. So this role model is based on it's not based on facts. So it's based on so-called scientists who wanted to ensure their social position. And another fact is this. It continued. So I know one case, it's in the film too, that a German scientist with the Lady of Wix, it was not in his imagination that the Lady of Wix in the Queen's grave is the excavates are female. So he wouldn't accept it that women were in leader positions 2,500 years ago. So it had to be a king, and then they rewrote the wrong things, and that was it was surprising that scientists did it. And I mean, today it's absolutely impossible for us to do that. And also the findings of the Viking Viking or the Viking female Viking warrior in the 70s, there were one female scientist who wrote down that this are female bones, but nobody wanted to read that. It was a man. So that's what was very, very interesting for me and surprising.
I completely agreeing with Birgit that there was this stereotyping and imposition of Christian religion and just cultural stereotypes into the past that were not taken critically, were not questioned, presented as a natural order of things, circular reasoning of we expect it like this, so it is like this, and you see we kind of self-fulfilling prophecy when we are examining historic records. Right.
Kate, can you tell us a little bit more about your research regarding gender roles? And what are some of the questions that still need to be answered?
So regarding gender, the research, okay, thank you for this question. My research is very much driven by what I find. I stumble into these discoveries when they're not expected. As I already told you, I didn't expect to find male-female differences in diet. So that was unexpected, and that started a new line of research. So now what we are looking at, and I'm working with a young scholar, Melanie Miller, on trying to trace how early these dietary differences set on. With modern technology, it became possible to microsample teeth. Teeth form right after we are born. They start forming right after we are born. So we technically can trace how child's diet, and we can do it in a grown-up. So we take teeth from the grown-up and reconstruct their diet during their first 5 years of life. So we are looking at whether boys or girls were weaned at the same time. Were solid foods and high or low quality solid foods introduced to boys or girls differently? When do these differences start happening? You can also look at teeth for manifestations of childhood stress, illness. Again, you're looking at adults who made it, who survived the childhood, were childhoods of boys and girls different at the time? That's one of the interesting things we are looking at. Another thing, like my initial study was based on a city. It's an urban population. It's a capital of a dynasty. We are looking at probably fairly well-to-do people. One thing that I haven't got to yet is what about small farming communities? Do we find the same male-female differences there? Or maybe they are more gender equal because boys and girls need to help on the farm and everyone is involved, and maybe we don't get divided household yet there in the Bronze Age. So these are two directions for my personal research.
Birgit, in your film, you combine interviews with scientists with reenactment scenes with actors from the history. What was the creative process behind that?
Yeah, these reconstructions are not only to show how the people live in the past. It's not only that. What we try to do is was to show surprising facts. If you look at the scene with the burial, the Viking warrior burial, first you mean when you see that you think, there is a warrior, male warrior. It's a burial from yes, a Viking warrior. So, and then we tell another story. We change the story, and in collaboration with the scientists, we tell step by step that this is not that what it's meant to be. It is something else, and it's in combination with the scientists. We tell another story from the past, a surprising story, a different story, and it's not just to tell or to create some picture material to have a film. Yeah, it's about telling some new facts, tell the history in another way. It's also we have hunters. We have here Stone Age hunters in the film. Normally, when you see there's films about Stone Age and you see reconstructions, you see always men. And the surprising fact is that we have a group of people, and there are also women. So and this is not the common way to tell the story from the past. And we try to show another past or a different past to other films we know. So this was the intention for these recreations. It's only about we would like to give an additional value, yeah, on this gender topic. So to give the audience a link to, hey, look at this history could have been like that also.
Okay, thank you. Kate, can you tell us what fascinates you about your job at the moment? For example, what fascinates you about Chinese dynasties and the environment of China?
Didn't quite expect this question. Well, right now we submitted actually a paper on sexually transmitted syphilis in China. And being in the middle of COVID epidemic, it became an interesting development for me because for sexually transmitted syphilis, there are two competing models in Europe. One pre-Columbian, contending that sexually transmitted syphilis was in Europe long ago, present, maybe conflicted with leprosy, just not recognized as a separate disease, and evading our notice. And alternative model is that Columbus, returning from America in 1493, brought in sexually transmitted syphilis. With China, there is equivalent model that Vasco da Gama in 1497 sailed out of Europe and landed in India and brought the same sexually transmitted syphilis. And then we have cultural phenomenon of blaming this disease on the foreigners. Japanese blame it on Chinese, Chinese blame it on a particular province. You see the same in Europe, mal francosum, mal neapolitanica, which particular nation culture responsible for bringing the disease. So we actually found 3 skeletons dating, and we radiocarbon dated them to a much earlier moment in history, to Tang Dynasty. They have skeletal changes that suggest sexually transmitted syphilis, which suggests that sexually transmitted syphilis is probably present throughout the world early on. And what we see in 1492 is a new cultural phenomenon, maybe with expansion of global travel, of perceiving, linking diseases to global travel and global exchange, and start blaming diseases on the other nations. So that's something that, but it's completely irrelevant to the movie we are talking about right now. But that's something that occupied me for the last year.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Birgit, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the filming process. Do you remember what was the biggest challenge for you while making this film?
To tell the facts in the right way. So you can make many mistakes with this all scientific facts. So this is challenging to do it in the right way and to understand it on the right way. If you turn one word, you're wrong. So this is very, very challenging in every scientific film. So yeah, this is in this case, it was it was so many facts. So I have had only the time for 52 minutes. I needed more. I need 90. I need 120 minutes. So there are many stories, and I wanted to show more. And this was challenging to bring a film in 52 minutes and to tell the facts. How would you say? Entertaining, but right. Yeah.
And what was the reaction from the audience?
We have had positive reactions, especially in social media. Yeah. Many of the viewers were very surprised of that fact. So they didn't know it, because in the school books there is something else. There is something else written, and history. Many people think that history is a static process, but it isn't. Yeah, we find always, or scientists like Kate, they find always new things, and it's not a direct line. So it's to understand this will help us to put more and more such facts to a broader public, and I think the people will want to know that. Yes. And I was really surprised. Men and women wrote to us that they thought the film is very, very good and very, very surprising, and they want more of that. So Kate.
It's a very exciting. It's a very exciting movie. It's exciting movie.
So, Kate, what is the importance of the environment that you find the remains in?
Yeah, interesting question. Well, since I work in China, I mostly work with salvage excavation teams. So, as you know, in China, there is lots of large-scale construction, and cultural resource preservation requires that everything that construction touches needs to be excavated. China is very good in conserving what's found. There are archaeological sites that, when they're found to be significant, they can be conserved in their entirety. If they're not conserved in their entirety, then everything is lifted, everything is cataloged, everything is preserved, put into good storage. But in terms of environment can be, of course, very destructive to archaeological remains. If we work with acidic soils, or there is a farmland on top and there is manure and fertilization, then the skeletons turn into dust, artifacts turn into dust, everything degrades, and then you don't have much material to work with. So you hope for a good soil and undisturbed excavation. And of course, people have been living on top there for a long period of time. So we also find intrusive burials, and we find looting. People know that in Bronze Age there were coins and interesting artifacts. So back, starting from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they went looting burials, trying to pick up interesting pots, resell them, and that all messes up archaeological record to an extent.
And my last question is to you, Birgit. What topic will you focus on next?
Oh, I'm involved in so many topics. So it's scientifically is at the moment a film about the health benefits of walking, normal walking, because in the pandemic, during lockdowns in Germany and in France and all over Europe and the rest of the world, walking and going for a walk outside is a new hobby for a lot of people, and walking scientifically is very, very good health tool. It affects all with your body and your mind and so on. This is the next film I'm doing, science film. But I'm also in historical true crime cases involved today. I can't tell you more about that, but it's more on historical facts and more, it's a part of German history, and there's a murder case also in it. So this is the next what I'm doing, and maybe another film about gender aspects from the past. But maybe we start maybe next month with research. Hopefully. Yeah.
So it sounds like there is a lot to look forward to. Thank you very much, ladies, for participating in this interview, and I wish you good luck with all your upcoming projects and research.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Birgit.
Thank you, Kate. See you soon.
And thank you also to the viewers. Remember that you can still watch the film on our platform watchandknow.cz, among many other films that are currently in the international competition of AFO 56. So enjoy.